Ever had this happen? You open your wet palette, ready for a relaxing painting session, and your wet palette has successfully turned itself into a petri dish. Congratulations. And if dealing with mold isn't enough, there's this tedious chore. Cutting up parchment paper every time you want to paint. Measure, cut, trim, only to use a small piece before tossing it out. It's time-consuming and wasteful. Hello everyone, I'm Enzlow Greymane, a passionate miniature painter just like you. After getting frustrated with moldy palettes and the endless cycle of cutting parchment paper, I developed a simple solution. I call it the Enzlow Wet Palette System. It's an easy way to keep your paints fresh and your palette mold-free without the hassle. Also, stick around to the end for a couple bonus tips on taking your wet palette maintenance even further. This system begins with choosing the right wet palette and membranes. The wet palette that this system uses is a Redgrass Games wet palette and the Reusable Hydration Membranes here in my left hand. We do not use the hydration paper sheets in the right hand. The biggest benefit of using this system is that you will be able to reuse these hydration membranes well over 15 times each. Doing the math, a pack of 15 hydration membranes will last you over 225 uses as long as you follow this system. To begin a painting session, I pull out a previously used membrane that I had let dry for an entire day. Allowing these membranes to dry for an entire day is what will prevent mold from growing. Per the instructions, you can just wash these membranes and then immediately put them back on the sponge and begin using them again. However, allowing them to dry for an entire day and rotating between two sheets will allow these membranes to be used beyond their design specifications. After placing the membrane on the sponge, it begins to absorb water unevenly, which causes wrinkles to form. To smooth these out, I lift up one side of the membrane slightly, gently pulling to eliminate the wrinkles while keeping it aligned on the sponge. Then I press the membrane back down, working to reduce any air bubbles. I'll repeat this on the other side, or as needed, until I'm satisfied with the smoothness. It's very similar to applying a screen protector on a phone, but much more forgiving. The instructions clearly indicate that you're not supposed to get the top of the membrane wet. However, if you manage to do that, you can just use a simple paper towel or kitchen roll to kind of dry the top off a little bit after setting it up. Placing the membrane on the sponge tends to absorb quite a bit of water, so I like to squirt a little bit of water here on the sides to kind of rehydrate the sponge a bit, and then we're ready to put down some paints. When I place paints on my palette, I prefer to do it on the right side of the palette here. That way it's close to my paper towel and wash basin, providing easy access to all three to keep the process smooth. If I decide to paint later on in the day and I use different colors, I'll basically just make new columns moving leftward across the palette. You'll notice in this sped up video that dispensing paint from these Pro Acryl bottles is kind of time consuming, and I don't know if I'm a fan of them really. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. One important thing to keep in mind while using these membranes is that you're not really supposed to use any kind of speed paints, contrast colors, metallic paints, washes, technical paints, and so on. So I like to use these little stainless steel dishes that you can get online for those types of paints. You can just place them right on top of the palette, put those paints in there, and that will protect the membrane and keep it from getting degraded or whatever. Alrighty, with the palette set up, we can go ahead and throw some ultramarine blue on this base boy. Testing everything out here. Generally, the palette is good to use for about a day or close to about 24 hours before you want to definitely take it out, clean it, and let it dry. After wrapping up my painting session, it's time to clean the wet palette. First, I remove the membrane and set it aside so I can easily access the sponge beneath. With the sponge removed, I gently squeeze out the excess water. Once I've removed most of the water, I set the sponge aside. I place the membrane back into the palette tray. This provides a firm surface, making it easier to clean. I take the palette to the sink and start cleaning the membrane by gently rubbing off the paint with my fingers under running water. For any stubborn spots, I soak and squeeze the sponge a couple of times to flush out residual paint, then use it to wipe off any remaining paint from the membrane. Once the membrane is clean, I remove it from the palette again and put the sponge back into the palette so it's ready for next time. To reiterate a previous point, make sure you do this within 24 hours of using the membrane, otherwise you risk the possibility of growing mold. Once I've cleaned the membrane, I like to take it to a southern facing window and place it on the windowsill, bottom side up, on a piece of paper towel. You can see here that I've slid the other membrane that I have rotation over in order to place this wet one down on the paper towel. Having these in a southern facing window, in my mind, will help prevent mold growth, as the UV rays will actually kill any kind of growth like that. Grabbing this other sheet from the rotation, we can now place it in the wet palette and start the process all over again. If you'd like, you can rewind back to the 155 mark and watch it on an endless loop forever. However, I'm going to cover some of the bonus tips that I talked about early on in the video. In my current rotation, I use 2 membranes. I could add a third membrane, allowing each membrane an additional day to dry between uses. This might be useful if you live in an area that is very humid. My humidity is actually about average and about 50 to 60 relative humidity at any time. Another bonus tip would be to add another sponge and keep a separate rotation for sponges. Even if you have more than 2 sponges, like 3 sponges, allowing these sponges to dry completely like this one here in my hands will help prevent mold and that kind of stuff from forming. It also kind of spread out the usage of overall of the different sponges, kind of keeping them all in good shape. And there you have it, folks. That is the Enzlow Wet Palette System. I hope it makes your painting sessions more efficient and enjoyable, and please do share this with your friends and let them know. Thank you and have a great day.